used to work down in the Portlands, just south of Commissioner Street, about a block east of the middle of nowhere. It was like a war zone. It was abandoned. Most of the buildings there were empty, if they were even still standing. And I left one day at the end of the day, and I pulled onto a street which is best described as an abandoned road. And there was a cab sitting there, empty. The door was open. The engine was running. In front of the cab, there was a pair of sandals on the road. And beyond that, about 150 meters away was a truck, a City of Toronto Public Works truck. It's strange to see anyone down there. This was especially strange, so I got out of my car and I started walking towards the truck. And I got about halfway when I noticed that the driver was leaning out the window and he was talking to somebody sitting by the side of the road that I hadn't noticed, the man who would turn out to be the cab driver. Before I could get to them, before I could reach them, the truck just drove away. I never had a chance to speak with them. When I got to the cab driver, I could see that he wasn't wearing a shirt because he'd taken it off and he was holding it against the side of his head and it was soaked in blood. He was a mess. I said, "Hi, my name is Zeb. Can I help you? Please let me call you an ambulance." And he said, No, I'll be okay. I looked at him and said, "What's your name, sir?" And he looked me in the eyes with this helpless confusion and said, I don't know. So I dialed 911. I talked to him. I kept him present. I tried to make sure he stayed awake, and I did my best to control the bleeding. It was the only thing that I could do. Eventually, the ambulance showed up, and they were right on it. They did their jobs. They were very professional. And as one of the medics was strapping him into the back, the other one took my statement, wrote down my name and my number, everything that I'd seen. And then he said, "Look, we've got to get him to St. Mike's Hospital right now. Can you take care of that?" Pointing at his cab. So I said, sure, and I walked down to the cab as they drove away, and I put his sandals in the car, and I shut off the engine. I saw a stack of bills tucked next to his seat that was about an inch thick, obviously his float. I locked that into the trunk, locked up the car, and then I called the cab company. I didn't know his name, and the cab company, the woman there at least, didn't have the time to find out who I was talking about. I knew the number of the cab, but she didn't know that offhand, and she was busy. It was a high call volume. So I thought, forget this, and I took the keys and I drove to the hospital. And I walked into the emergency room and I talked to the admitting nurse. And the admitting nurse was also busy. She also didn't know who I was talking about, and frankly, she didn't seem to understand why I cared. And I got frustrated at this point, and I got argumentative, and I got loud. And eventually a nurse walked over who had been treating him, and she said, "I know who you're talking about, sir. He's doing well, he's stable, and his family's on his way down." And she took his keys. And for the first time, I was free. I didn't have a task that I had to deal with. And without that distraction, I didn't have anything to keep all of these emotions that I'd been ignoring away, and they all started to rush in, and it was overwhelming. So I turned to leave as quickly as I could, and I heard a man that I could only describe as a crazy homeless man say, "Hey! What you did was beautiful. There should be more people in this world like you." It was a very nice thing for him to say, but in my current state of mind, I wasn't really prepared to receive it. And I just sort of thanked him, and I got out of there as quickly as I could, and I went and I got really drunk because I wanted to forget it all. I didn't want to think about it anymore. And I didn't, for about a year. And then I got a subpoena to testify at the trial of the two men who were accused of luring that cab driver down to an abandoned road about a block east of the middle of nowhere and tried to murder him with a brick. And that took about a week of my life total, spread it over 6 months. And it was an intensely frustrating experience because I didn't actually see anything. All I could say was, I found a guy and he was hurt. How hurt? I don't know, ask his doctor. I felt really useless there, and I was just sitting there day after day, and I'd listen to the defense attorney stall and I listened to the judge talk about how he couldn't possibly hold a trial on a Friday in the middle of summer. And by the end of it, I just thought, you know, you try to do the right thing. And what do you get out of it? You lose a week's pay. And as I sat there feeling sorry for myself, this man who I'd never seen walked up to me and he said, "Zebulon, you're the man that found me. You called the ambulance." I would have never recognized him. When I found him, his face had swollen to twice its normal size, and with all the blood and all the trauma, I just kind of didn't notice that part. He was a different man standing in front of me. And he said, "I need to thank you for saving my life." That made me feel really uncomfortable. And I just immediately dismissed it. I said, no, I didn't do anything special. I just, anyone would have done this. He said, "The doctors told me how badly I was hurt. And they told me that if you hadn't shown up when you did, and if you hadn't have called the ambulance, I would have died. You're the reason my kids have a father." So I just hugged him, because I didn't know what else to do at that point. And I said, I'm really glad that you're okay. And I didn't feel sorry for myself anymore. I haven't told this story before, because I'm still really uncomfortable with the idea that I did something special. I pushed 3 buttons on my cell phone. I used less than 5 minutes of my airtime, and I waited with him for less than 10 minutes. Those 3 things were part of what saved his life. But when you say, "I saved his life," it sounds special, and it sounds heroic, and it sounds profound. But when you list those 3 simple things, it sounds like what anyone should do if they find someone who's hurt. But I think about that city employee who just drove away and left him there. And I think about the woman at the cab company and the nurse in the hospital that couldn't be bothered to figure out who this man was. And then I think about that man that I can only describe as a crazy homeless man, because that's the only way anyone would ever think of him. And that kind of disgusts me, because he understood and he recognized that this was a person that needed to be helped. And if you ask me, the world needs more people like him. Thanks.